You know, whenever we have legal peril questions, we always bring in Laura Ingraham. Laura's going to be joining us very shortly, and I'm just curious, what sort of hard time would the person, Laura, what sort of hard time would the person who stole Tom Brady's jersey be facing?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends if they've moved the jersey across state lines.
Oh, that's the problem.
We could have mail fraud. We could involve wire fraud. There could be a conspiracy, maybe a RICO violation here. So there's potential for punitive damages on the civil side. So this is, I think Brady's going to get that shirt back. What do you think?
Jersey Gate.
I hope so. Someone went in his bag and actually deliberately took it, he says. All right, let's talk about what's happening today in the courts, because the executive order is going to be heard by these 3 judges in the Ninth Circuit. What do you think will happen? Will they rule in the president's favor, or will they send it to the Supreme Court?
Well, it's an interesting makeup. We have one Obama judge, we have one Clinton judge, and we have one George W. Bush judge. So one judge sits in Hawaii. The case will be heard in San Francisco. And remember, the case is not a case on the merits of whether the ban is constitutional. The case only involves the stay that was put into effect, the emergency stay that was granted by the lower court, the district court last week. So the appellate court has to look at 2 things. Well, a couple of things, but 2 things are the most important. What is the likelihood of success on the merits for the petitioners? Is it likely that this ban will be overturned as unconstitutional or contrary to statutory interpretation? And number 2, the other point is there irreparable harm that will be done to either Minnesota and I believe Washington State is the other state. So Minnesota and Washington State are the litigants. Now, I think those 2 hurdles are very difficult to clear, both the likelihood of success on the merits, given what we know about Section 1182, giving the president broad authority, and the irreparable harm that is very difficult to remedy. Irreparable harm to Minnesota and to Washington State, I don't think either of those 2 standards are met. You could also argue, guys, I know it's getting a little legalese here, you could also argue that the states themselves do not have standing to bring this case as states against the Trump administration. So those are the 3 things that they were briefed in the Justice Department's brief. They'll be argued. But I have a feeling they're probably not going to get relief from the Ninth Circuit. This will go to the Supreme Court, and Lord knows what will happen there.
But, Laura, let's take a scenario where the Ninth District Court says, no, the stay, we can't do it, and goes to the Supreme Court, it's 4-4, so it goes back to what the Ninth says. Having said that, it doesn't stop the administration from putting together their extreme vetting program and criteria and putting it in place in those 7 countries. It just stops the pause, correct?
Correct. And so I was talking to a couple of my former Supreme Court clerk colleagues last night on the phone, and we were thinking maybe this is a time for repeal and replace of the immigration pause. Maybe you redo that and maybe make it a little bit more specific. The president should come out, I think, and make the case for why this is in the nation's interest. He didn't do that. And I think a lot more people would be open to this idea. You might even get a few Democrats on your side. If the president goes to the nation and say, this is why this is important. We welcome immigrants. Of course, most Muslims around the world are welcome here. We welcome people from all over the globe. But this is about you and your safety. And let's get this right before we move forward. I think that would be a great way. That would make the case moot. In other words, the case would lose all standing because there really would be no case anymore. So that's something I would think about if I were advising the president legally on this.
Sure. And, of course, people shouldn't be surprised. President Trump promised during the campaign he was going to crack down on immigration. He also talked, and you know this well because you were following this as well, Kate Steinle was killed by an illegal who wound up with a gun in his hand. He had been deported 5 times. He was still extraordinarily in this country. Bill O'Reilly asked the president about it during that same interview that we saw about 10 minutes of it on, there's the guy who killed Kate Steinle on, right? We saw a lot of the interview at the Super Bowl. Here's some more on what's the deal with these illegals and the Democrats. Listen to this.
Why do the Democrats oppose protecting Americans from violent foreign criminals?
Because they think that's their voter.
They think that's their voter. Now,
potential voter.
Yeah. You know, you go into the Twitter sphere, and there's a lot of that stuff out there. Do you think that's accurate?
I think he's largely right about that. We know from a groundbreaking study on naturalized citizens voting was done back in 2012 by James Gimple. He's a professor at University of Maryland. And he examined the voting patterns of naturalized foreign-born immigrants in the United States, looked at places like Broward County, Florida, Clark County, Nevada, and other counties across the United States where large new voting blocks overwhelmingly represented the Democrat Party. So San Bernardino County, Florida, I mean, I lived there for a summer back in 1984. That was a Republican stronghold. Now there's only like 33% of Republicans. Back in 1980, it was 55% of Republicans. So there's no doubt about it that immigration has had a lot of benefits to the country, but it's really changed the electoral makeup in favor of the Democrats. They know that, and there are other reasons they like a lot of illegal immigrants with getting amnesty, but they know that that's a new treasure trove of voters for them. And they're going to bank on that. That's why they were trying to push through immigration amnesty.
In the state of California, they're now talking about making, instead of sanctuary cities, making the whole state a sanctuary state. And one of the leaders, the leader of the Senate, is that right?
Yeah,
the Senate
Democrat
leader. Listen to what he said about his family members.
I can tell you half of my family would be eligible for deportation under the executive order, because if they got a false Social Security card, if they got a false identification, if they got a false driver's license prior to us passing AB 60, if they got a false green card, and anyone who has family members, you know, who are undocumented knows that almost entirely everybody has secured some sort of false identification. That's what you need to survive, to work. They are eligible for massive deportation.
Wow.
So not only is his family, half his family in the country illegally, they've got fake driver's licenses and Social Security numbers, and he's the Senate leader for the state of California.
You know what that's called in court, guys? That's called a statement against interest. That would be admissible in an immigration court against his family
His whole
members.
family.
This guy's just not very smart. And I have a question for him. What documents can American citizens fake? Fraudulent documents can they use to board an airplane, to get other federal benefits,
to vote,
and expect not to be prosecuted?
Yeah.
The idea that illegal immigrants should be able to use false paperwork, and then everyone should just say, oh, isn't this wonderful? Isn't it great because they just needed to work? Well, yeah, there are a lot of people who need to work in Nigeria, in California, in Connecticut, my home state, who don't have jobs. So should all of them be able to just, okay, we're going to use false paperwork to either come into the country or to travel around the country or to get a government job? That is the kind of hubris that I think people are so tired of. There are a lot of people hurting out there. I know there are a lot of immigrants who want to come here, and we'll have an orderly process of doing that. But the idea that we should give our legal imprimatur to people who routinely falsify documents puts our national security at risk, our economic standing at risk, and the entire rule of law at risk. That is preposterous.
All right, Laura, thanks so much. It's crazy, and he's caught on tape, and that was allowed. So let's see what happens to that. But that just shows you how impervious he feels to saying things like that, because he doesn't think there's going to be any follow-through, and there probably isn't.
There probably won't be.